Welcome to Meet the Candidate with your host, Sulani Madsen. Meet the Candidate is your opportunity to see local candidates and hear about the experiences that have shaped their lives. Meet the Candidate is a nonpartisan community project brought to you by your friends at the Ponderosa Republican Women's Club, North by Northwest Digital, We Believe, We Vote, and the McGarry Law Office, the landlord's attorney. Now, here's Sulani.
Well, welcome to this edition of Meet the Candidate. My guest today is Scott Miller, who is running for Superior Court for Judge, Position 6.
Correct.
Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
This is just a simple format, just finding out more about you. So where did you grow up?
Grew up in Pullman and went all the way through school down in Pullman, and then immediately left to go to college. Started at Western and ended up at Gonzaga.
So how many of your classmates in Pullman actually stayed in Pullman to go to school? Is that uncommon?
It's not real common, and we have quite an interesting group of classmates. We have airline pilots, and we have military people, and we have rodeo cowboys, and all kinds of different stuff.
Kind of an eclectic group, then.
It is.
That's
And we get
fun.
together every once in a while. There was a
Cool.
class reunion on the East Coast one time, just because, why not?
Well, sure. It's an excuse to travel.
Well, there's that, yeah. And also people who don't want to come back to Pullman, so we go visit them.
Okay. That works.
Sure.
So you left town and you went to school at Whitworth?
Well, I teach at Whitworth.
Oh, you teach at Whitworth. I looked
Right.
at the wrong place.
Yeah,
Education.
actually went to school
Western.
at Gonzaga, went Western, and then Gonzaga Law.
Okay. So the local education for
Right.
law school.
Yeah, we've been here since 1977 when I started work at KXLY and then went to KHQ, and then decided law was really where I wanted to go. And I figured out I had to finish college first.
Yeah.
So I got that degree.
Well, you know, I mentioned one question I was thinking of for the judicial candidates, which is who is it that maybe was your inspiration since you came to law a little bit later? What was your inspiration to go into law school?
The inspiration for going to law school, I think, was when I was in Pullman before we came to Spokane. A friend of mine and I had a music store, and it kind of didn't work out quite so well, so I ended up in litigation with him and figured out, I can do this. It was something that I found really interesting. Believe it or not, even as a party, I found that kind of interesting. And then, as I mentioned, worked in broadcasting for a while and then moved into law, which is what I really wanted to do all along.
Well, that experience is an interesting one because that gives you a kind of a point of view from the other side of the bench.
It does, and I've represented both plaintiffs and defendants. I've represented criminal defendants, and it gives me an opportunity to not only see what the party sees sitting at the table, because your attorney represents you and is your advocate, and knowing what it's like to be the represented person, I think it might give me a little bit of insight as to what's going on, and so I can be a better lawyer.
Well, part of what we hope to do with Meet the Candidate is give people insights into the experiences that have shaped them. And one question I'd like to ask is what was your first job that let you connect work to money?
My very first job was delivering newspapers.
That's a classic.
I know. And it was in Pullman. I was delivering the Lewiston Morning Tribune and had a small circulation. I had to go knocking on doors to get collections. And I kind of figured out pretty quickly that if I had to get up at 5 every morning and deliver papers, they're going to pay me for it.
That's an incentive, yeah.
Yes, it was.
Well, another thing that sometimes shapes our worldview is travel and
Sure.
some interesting travel experiences. You mentioned traveling back to the East Coast
That was fun, yeah.
to visit your classmates. Some other travel experiences that you've learned from?
We had an opportunity as a family to spend Christmas on the island of Malta.
Oh.
And that was an absolutely fascinating opportunity to see historical opportunities and historical places. It's a very interesting place in the winter. It's really a European summer destination. And when we were there in the winter, we were given an opportunity to see more of the island, I think, than a lot of people, or islands. There are 3. And It was fun because we were able to go there as a family, but it was unique because we were able to go and see some places not only goes all the way back to biblical times, but also World War II was just devastating. And
Right.
you go one block and there's a brand new building, and then the next block they still have World War II devastation. So it's a very interesting place to go. I highly recommend it. And then after that, we went to the Vatican for Christmas, which was pretty special too.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
It was
What-
great.
Were you there for the Christmas Eve?
No, we were on Malta for Christmas Eve.
Oh, on Christmas Eve.
And then we went to the Vatican after that for the Christmas time right after
Okay.
Christmas. But they still had everything in St. Peter's Square was amazing.
Wow. Wow, it sounds like a lot of fun.
I'd like to do it again.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. So is there someone in the legal profession that you admire as you started your career, someone that you wanted to pattern yourself after?
It always fascinated me about William O. Douglas, who came from Yakima and came back to Yakima regularly. And so he left a very large footprint, and it was...
There's quite a display of his memorabilia in the museum in Yakima.
Yes. And, of course, he left a very large footprint in Washington, D.C. and on the country. And so I think everybody who goes to law school initially thinks of themselves as a future Supreme Court justice. And, of course, there are only a few of
Right.
those. So I never got there. But I think that the idea of being a judge is something that a lot of lawyers either continue with through their career, or they kind of get over it. And what I found was that as I was practicing, there were some good lawyers and there were some not great lawyers, and oftentimes it was the judge that was able to pull it all together. And even lawyers who weren't doing such a fabulous job representing their client can be helped along by a judge understanding what they're trying to do and making rulings that are correct. Sometimes you get a ruling you don't like. It happens. But that doesn't mean it was the wrong ruling. And as long as the judge is understanding the case and taking the case in the correct order, whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, you end up in the right place. And lawyers appreciate judges who are familiar with the law and are able to make right rulings.
What kinds of cases does the Superior Court handle?
From a criminal standpoint, they handle felonies. The district court would handle most of the misdemeanors, and there, of course, will be misdemeanors also at the Superior Court level if associated with a felony. But from a civil standpoint, it's a court of general jurisdiction, which means there is no upper limit. You can have a case that is literally millions of dollars at stake, and there is no maximum amount. Then after the Superior Court would come the Court of Appeals. We have intermediate courts of appeals in the state of Washington, 3 of them. And then after that's the state Supreme Court.
Okay. I'm looking to see what else would be a good judicial question to ask.
A judicial
A
question.
judicial question. What's the most interesting case that you've had handled as an attorney?
They're all important.
Without violating client privilege, but
Certainly. All cases are important to the client, and that makes them important to me. And if you don't go into the courtroom with that understanding, you shouldn't be there. But in terms of the most interesting case, I would have to go back a few years and say that it was, I'm not sure it was the most interesting, but I think it was the most meaningful case for me, because it involved a young woman who was a golf pro here in Spokane. And the city of Spokane refused to renew her contract because she was a woman. And they said so. They said that was the reason, that they didn't think that a woman golf pro could attract golfers the same way that a male golf
There aren't
pro
any
could.
women who are golfers? That's kind of, well, anyway.
Well, I'm on your side. And so, unfortunately, the Superior Court judge ruled that the city was right and dismissed the case. So we appealed, and it took it all the way to the state Supreme Court, which interpreted the state constitution protecting gender rights. Excuse me. And so we got a positive result from the state Supreme Court, and they changed the law because of my client. And so now if you are an employee, or in her case, she was an independent contractor, you have the same rights as everybody else. Believe it or not, that wasn't true a few years ago, and now it is.
No, I'm old enough to remember that.
You do?
Yeah.
You remember the case? Okay.
No, not the case, but to remember those kinds of attitudes. So.
Okay, yeah, I know, and they're not all gone.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to plow through them. We've come to that 1-minute wrap-up where it's your opportunity to answer the question, why should people vote for Scott Miller for Superior Court Judge, Position 6?
Experience. Everybody who comes out of law school thinks they're ready to be a judge, and it's usually not true. Usually you need some seasoning. And after a few years, you become very good at being an advocate, representing your client zealously and correctly, but that doesn't make a good judge. It takes some years of understanding that as you go through the process, there is a learning curve that comes into it, so that when you go into the courtroom, either as an attorney or more importantly as a judge, you're able to find a way for the people to work together without absolutely coming unhinged in the process. And that, frankly, that just comes from years of experience in working in the area. It reminds me of the old Mark Twain quote, which I'm sure I'll get wrong, when he said...
Well, you're paraphrasing him then.
Paraphrasing. When I was 14, I was very unhappy with my father. He knew nothing, and when I became 21, it was amazing how much he'd learned in 7 years.
Yeah.
That happens in the law, too. As you work through the process, you become more seasoned, you become, in my experience, a broader background, and I think a better judge.
Okay, that's a good wrap-up. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Meet the Candidate. Spokane Talks Online thanks our community-minded partners at Ponderosa Republican Women's Club, North by Northwest Digital, We Believe, We Vote, and the McGarry Law Office, the landlord's attorney, for helping make Meet the Candidate possible.